Alan Watts' secret to instantly feeling truly alive. We begin this journey by recognizing that to feel truly alive is to embrace the immediacy of experience. I invite you, here and now, to notice your breath, its rise and fall, echoing the rhythm of existence itself. We often live as if tethered to a distant future or anchored in a regretted past, forgetting that the only realm of true aliveness is this fleeting moment. I've discovered in my own life that when I stop chasing goals as distant mirages and instead lean into the texture of the present, an electric aliveness pulses through every cell. Can you recall a time when you were so absorbed in a simple act, walking, listening, tasting, that the world around you seemed to expand in clarity and wonder? That expansion is not a mystical anomaly, but the natural state of being when we shed the cloak of distraction. Imagine life as a river. We can struggle against its current, clinging to the riverbank's false security, or we can surrender to the flow, allowing each rapid and eddy to reveal new dimensions of our own strength and adaptability. When I face a challenge, I'm reminded that the water is not the enemy, it's the guide. Practical life advice often centers on planning and preparation, and yet, the richest flourishes of life emerge when we trust the river's intelligence. Ask yourself, what if uncertainty isn't a threat but an invitation? What if your anxiety about tomorrow is simply the mind rehearsing horrors that may never materialize? In that uncertainty lies possibility, and in possibility lies vitality. Consider the difference between watching a sunset and truly seeing it. One is a passive gaze, the other a full-bodied communion. We can apply this lens to our daily routines, eating a meal mindlessly or savoring each flavor, scrolling endlessly or pausing to reflect on a single idea. I've found that life's profundity often hides in its minutiae: a stranger's smile, the rhythm of rain on a windowpane, the warmth of sunlight on my skin. By training our attention to settle on these seemingly small phenomena, we cultivate a practice of presence. And presence is the alchemical key that transmutes existence into experience. In this opening phase, we establish the first-minute hook for our lives, a philosophical setup that grabs our own attention. Like the most riveting video, your life's opening act needs a question strong enough to jolt you awake. So I ask you now, what are you missing by living in the margins of moments? How many seconds have slipped by while your mind chased ghosts of past regrets or future anxieties? This is not a call to abandon planning or responsibility, but rather a call to integrate planning within presence. We plan from here, not from a future hallucination.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We accelerate our inquiry by examining the paradox of action versus being. We celebrate action in our culture, idolizing the go-getter and the hustle. Yet, Alan Watts taught that the universe dances not by striving but by effortlessly unfolding. A flower does not force its petals open, it blooms when conditions align. What would happen if you approached your ambitions like a bloom, tending the soil of your mind, nourishing the roots of your intentions, and then allowing your actions to emerge naturally? This shift from frantic doing to mindful becoming bridges the gap between theory and practice. At this moment, we introduce a re-engagement spark, an anecdote of Watts himself, reclining by a koi pond, intrigued by how the fish swam without anxiety or agenda. The fish simply were so immersed in their elemental nature that their existence was a poem of movement. In that reflection, Watts saw a mirror of human possibility, that we too could learn to swim in the currents of life without clutching at the shore. How often have you swum with tension in your shoulders, bracing for imagined dangers ahead? I challenge you, what if you relaxed into your own flow? Our practical advice emerges seamlessly from these philosophical roots. Try this exercise. For the next 5 minutes, choose one ordinary task: drinking a cup of tea, folding laundry, sending an email, and do it with complete attention. Notice the sensations, the subtle shifts in temperature, the texture of the paper or liquid, the weight of your own body in the chair. This simple practice, repeated daily, builds a muscle of presence that transforms every aspect of your life. You become less reactive to stress, more attuned to beauty, and more capable of making choices aligned with your deepest values. This first section closes by clarifying our expectations. We're embarking on a voyage that promises both insight and transformation. We won't reveal all the answers here, but we'll lay the groundwork for the journey ahead, understanding presence, embracing uncertainty, and aligning action with being. By learning to swim, we prepare for the rapids and the calm alike. And so, as we stand at the river's edge, I ask you once more, are you ready to dive into the current of your own life and to taste the aliveness that only the present moment can provide? The paradox of effortless action, how surrender fuels true power. We often assume that strength means pushing harder, but what invites us to consider that real power arises when we release our tight grip and allow life to move through us. We picture a skilled surfer poised on a wave, not fighting the ocean, but merging with its energy in a dance of balance. I've felt that sensation, that exhilarating moment when control dissolves and flow takes over. You might think surrender implies weakness, yet it is precisely through yielding that we discover our most potent agency. But when we stop forcing outcomes and instead respond with openness, we tap into a greater intelligence than our individual will. Ask yourself, have you ever tried to force a solution, only to become more entangled in the problem? What if letting go is the secret lever that shifts the entire landscape? I challenge you to recall a time when you felt in the zone, performing effortlessly, perhaps while playing a sport, creating art, or engaged in a deep conversation. Notice how power in those moments felt different, not rigid or strained, but fluid, creative, and expansive. Alan Watts would say that this state mirrors the natural ebb and flow of the universe. We're not separate warring agents fighting for control, we're participants in a cosmic play. This perspective doesn't discourage ambition, it reframes action as arising from connection rather than compulsion. In practical terms, when you approach a project, instead of micromanaging each detail, set your intention clearly. Then step back to let inspiration and emergent opportunities guide your steps. It's like planting a seed. You prepare the soil, water it, and trust that the seed will sprout, even if you can't see the roots forming underground. In the mid-video intensity of our own lived experience, we hit moments of conflict. We want results now, yet true growth seems to demand patience and trust. This tension can feel unbearable, so we crank up our efforts, only to burn out faster. Here's where surrender becomes radical self-care. By pausing and observing our inner landscape, the tightness in our chest, the racing thoughts, we create space for clarity. I've practiced this by scheduling micro breaks throughout my day, a minute of conscious breathing, a moment of gratitude, a brief pause to ask, what does this moment need? Those interludes don't slow me down, they supercharge my productivity by resetting my nervous system and sharpening my focus. Let's introduce a vivid metaphor. Imagine you're piloting a hot air balloon. You can shove the burner at full blast, but without adjusting the vents, The balloon will either soar uncontrollably or descend too quickly. But the secret lies in fine-tuning the balance, adding heat when you need altitude, releasing it when you glide. That art of modulation is surrender in action. It's not passive resignation, but an active dialogue with reality. How might you apply this modulation in your own goals? Perhaps by setting weekly intentions rather than daily micro-targets, giving yourself permission to adjust course as new information emerges. At this point, let's re-engage with a powerful quote: "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." That's Watts reminding us that in many cases, our attempts to fix, push, or purge only stir the murk deeper, whereas stepping back allows sediment to settle, revealing clarity. When faced with emotional turmoil, rather than analyzing every thought, we might practice simple awareness, notice the feelings, let them pass like clouds across the sky. You'll be surprised how quickly the water calms when you stop poking it. And in the back half of our life's narrative, sustained engagement requires weaving surrender into the fabric of practice. It's not a one-off trick, but a living principle. I invite you to experiment with creative waiting. After generating ideas for a problem, set a timer and deliberately shift to something unrelated. Go for a walk, listen to music, play a quick game. Notice how the solution often arrives unbidden during those intervals. This is not accidental procrastination, but a strategic yield to unconscious processing. You tap into deeper cognitive layers that work best when you're not glaring at the screen. As we approach the endgame, our own sudden payoff, I want to share a wow moment from my life. During a high-stakes video project, I hit a creative block 6 hours before deadline. In panic, I stepped outside, sat under a tree, and simply breathed. Within minutes, an idea so clear and surprising emerged that it reshaped the entire narrative. That epiphany wouldn't have come through forced brainstorming, it was born from surrender. It felt as if the universe handed me the missing piece just when I stopped demanding it. Now, let me pose a super deep question. What part of your life are you still controlling too tightly? And what might happen if you softened your grip? Could you trust that life, your own inner life, included, knows the way better than your anxious mind? The paradox is that when we let go of being in charge, we actually gain mastery over our experience. In closing this segment, remember that effortless action isn't laziness, it's a dance between intention and receptivity. It's listening as much as speaking, observing as much as doing. The next part will guide us through cultivating the inner observer, from reactivity to reverence. Cultivating the inner observer, from reactivity to reverence. To transform our experience, we must learn to step back from the storm of emotions and thoughts, but cultivating an inner observer that watches without judgment. I've seen in my own life how easily we slip into reaction. A harsh email, and instantly our mind ignites with defensiveness. A traffic jam, and we feel the heat of frustration flood our chest. Yet beneath these reactions lies a stillness that is always present, waiting to be discovered. Imagine yourself as a mountain witnessing clouds passing across its summit. Sometimes the sky is clear, sometimes shrouded in mist, but the mountain remains unchanged. Can you sense that unshakable presence within you, even when emotions swirl like a tempest? When we identify with every impulse and story, we become enslaved to our own drama. Suffering emerges when we believe that our thoughts and feelings define us. But through the practice of observation, we create a space, a sacred gap, where choice becomes possible. Practical advice: set aside 2 periods each day, however brief, to simply sit and observe. Notice thoughts arising, note them as mental events, thinking, planning, judging, and let them float away like leaves on a stream. In those moments, you're not cultivating a new belief system, but awakening to the ground of being that has been with you all along. This shift from reactivity to reverence changes everything. Reverence for what? For the mystery of existence, for the gift of awareness, for the simple miracle of being alive. When I pause mid-task to acknowledge the miracle of my own breath, ordinary actions become sacraments. Drinking water becomes a ritual of gratitude. Walking the dog becomes a pilgrimage through the sacredness of life. By training ourselves to observe, we begin to recognize the beauty woven into the fabric of mundane reality. Have you noticed how the light falls through leaves in the morning, painting patterns of gold on the pavement? I invite you to linger with that image now, noticing not only its aesthetics but the wonder that rises in your chest. In our narrative's mid to late phase, we confront the dilemma of judgment. We habitually label experiences as good or bad, delightful or dreadful, trapping ourselves in a roller coaster of preferences. The observer's lens allows us to reframe each event as data, not destiny. A setback at work becomes feedback, not a verdict on our worth. A criticism becomes information we can integrate, not an attack we must defend against. This reframing is not about toxic positivity, it's about harnessing the power of perspective. I once received a harsh review of my work and felt my confidence crater. Instead of spiraling, I paused, observed my hurt, and asked, what is this feeling teaching me? The answer led me to refine my approach, ultimately elevating my craft. To deepen this practice, incorporate the 3-minute pause before responding in emotionally charged situations. Breathe in, witness the impulse, anger, fear, excitement, then breathe out, reminding yourself, I am the observer. In that pause resides wisdom. You'll find that many impulsive reactions dissipate, replaced by responses aligned with your highest values. This creates a feedback loop. The more you observe, the clearer your choices. The clearer your choices, the more reverence you bring to each moment. Now, I pose a profound question. If you observed your life without narrative or commentary, what patterns would emerge? What habitual loops would you identify, and how might you respond differently when you're mere awareness? This inquiry shifts us from living on autopilot to living with intention. It is the bridge from philosophical understanding to real-world transformation. As we prepare to reach our conclusion, take a moment to rest in the observer's seat. Feel the solidity of your awareness, the gentleness of your gaze upon thoughts and feelings. Recognize that cultivating the inner observer is not a one-time feat, but a lifelong art, one that turns every moment into an opportunity for awakening. The ultimate synthesis, living as both wave and ocean, we arrive now at the culmination of our exploration, the recognition that you are simultaneously the individual wave and the vast ocean. In this paradox lies your true freedom and power. A wave, by its nature, is distinct: its crest, its form, its unique journey across the sea. Yet it is inseparable from the ocean's depths, its currents, its boundless expanse. You are like that wave, a singular personality with quirks, desires, and narratives, yet you emerge from and dissolve back into the infinite field of consciousness. This realization shatters the illusion of separation, inviting you to live with both humility and audacity. When I fully embraced this synthesis, I noticed how my worries about personal success or failure lost their grip. I still set goals, nurture relationships, and care for my health, but I do so from the perspective of the ocean, aware that these waves crest and fall without touching my essential nature. Practical life advice. Begin each day by saying silently, "I am the ocean," before moving on to your tasks. Then, in moments of doubt, when your wave feels battered by criticism or circumstance, remind yourself, "I am also the wave." In this twofold affirmation, you honor both your unique story and your shared essence. Consider how this shift transforms conflict. When you argue with another, you may cling to being the wave, insisting on your viewpoint. Yet if you remember the ocean, you recognize that the other is also a wave within the same sea. The argument becomes a dance of forms, not a life or death struggle. I've found that in heated discussions, pausing to breathe and silently acknowledge we share the ocean dissolves tension and opens space for genuine dialogue. Have you tried this in your life? How might your interactions change if you remembered, in the heat of conflict, that you and the other are expressions of the same underlying reality? This synthesis also reframes our relationship with time. As a wave, you feel born, crest, and dissipate your life story bounded by birth and death. As the ocean, you are timeless, flowing through eons. You can honor your personal journey without fear of endings. Practical exercise. When facing a transition, graduation, career change, loss, imagine your wave returning to the ocean, only to rise again in a new form. Write this visualization as a brief paragraph or draw it as a simple sketch. Witness how the anxiety of endings softens into curiosity about new beginnings. Here's a super deep question. What would you attempt if you knew you were both wave and ocean, temporary form and eternal source? Perhaps you would take bolder creative risks, speak more honestly, love more freely. Perhaps you would forgive yourself and others more quickly, understanding that mistakes are waves that crest and fall, not permanent stains on your essence. But in our final wow moment, I invite you to perform the wave ocean meditation. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and visualize yourself as a wave cresting on the surface. Feel the excitement, the identity of form. Then let your awareness descend into the depths, merging with the vastness beneath. Alternate between these perspectives for 5 minutes. Notice how your sense of self expands and contracts with ease, settling into a spacious aliveness that transcends both extremes. As you emerge from that meditation, carry the synthesis into your day. When you pursue a goal, move like a wave powered by the ocean's depth. When you encounter fear or limitation, rest in the ocean's stillness. Live your personal story without losing sight of the cosmic story. This is the alchemy of presence, the heart of Alan Watts' secret, that life's fullness comes not from choosing between struggle and surrender, but from embodying both. So I leave you with one final question. How will you live today, knowing you are both wave and ocean? Let that inquiry guide your choices, your relationships, your breathing. In this union of form and formlessness lies your path to instantly feeling truly alive.